Today's show, we have Tim Wenzel. He is the Managing Director of Enterprise Security Risk Management at Kroll and the former Global Security Lead at Meta. We are having a wide-ranging conversation today about executive protection, risk in general, and how C-suites and corporations think about enterprise risk. You will not want to miss today's show. On the Titan Protection Show, we are honored to welcome Tim Wenzel, a CPP and Associate Managing Director of Enterprise Security Risk Management at Kroll and the creator of the Kindness Games. He is a former global security head at Meta and recognized thought leader in the security industry. Tim was named Global Influencer and Thought Leader by IFSEC International in 2022. He created the Kindness Games movement to redefine leadership through values, and he has built a corporate espionage, residential protection, and world-class ESRM programs from the ground up. Tim, welcome. Going to be a great conversation, and that is a heck of a resume. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I've got a lot of areas to cover here. I think the most interesting to me, and maybe not the audience as a whole, but just kind of seeing your start to finish, kind of where you're at now, where you started. I know you started in the guard industry, or at some point kind of in that piece, and have kind of progressed through a myriad of different things. That's interesting to me because I kind of started in that world too. And as we see the industry changing, specifically kind of technology, different ways things are going, I'm just kind of interested in your perspective of how things have evolved, what's kind of top of mind for you right now. But just kind of start off, give everybody kind of just a background of your, security career, where you started, kind of, just a brief overview of kind of how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, no worries. So we'll go ahead and start in second grade when I told my mom I was dropping out of school. Exactly. She laughed. I was serious. I did eventually graduate high school because the Army recruiter told me I had to. But while I was in high school, I actually joined the National Guard. I went to basic training between my junior and senior year, came back, got a job as a security guard. And then once I finished high school, I went to Army Medic School in San Antonio, Texas, which was awesome. Realized that being a medic was probably what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I'd probably just go ahead and grow fat and happy doing that. Did get a little fat, not so happy. So I basically have an 18-year career in emergency medicine. Like I said, I was in the Guard, so I was on the ambulance. I was an Army medic. In 2003, we did the invasion of Iraq, which was wonderful. Funnest thing I'd ever done in my life because I come from the cornfield of Illinois. There's literally nothing going on out there.
Right.
The most exciting thing going on out there was being on the ambulance. And so that was interesting. Did the first round of 15-month deployments there. So I came home in July of 2004. And when we got extended from our year to 15 months, they sent us to a cozy place called Abu Ghraib prison because there was a unit having issues there. We didn't know that they were torturing prisoners and now going to their court-martial investigation. So 2 weeks after we got there, it broke on the news and life got super interesting. For the first time ever, this kid from the cornfield saw people every day he had only ever seen on TV.
Right.
So
wow. And was your capacity there from a medical standpoint to support them in that capacity?
So I was actually assigned to military police. So I was a tactical medic with military police. So we ran missions and all the stuff. So I like the tactical stuff actually more than the medical stuff. And so then got home finally, and the ambulance was boring because nobody was shooting at me or trying to blow me up.
Right.
So what do I do? What do I do? Some friends said, you know what? You should get into executive protection because you have this background. So I saved up money. I went out to ESI in Colorado and took executive protection courses. And about 2 months after I graduated there in September 2007, I was back in Iraq as a security contractor, as a tactical medic attached to security teams. So I did that for a bunch of years from 2007 to 2010. and then came home because I did not want to be the last contractor in Iraq looking for a job, because I kind of started that war and we were kind of closing that war down. Not a bad way to spend your 20s, by the way, but it is what it is. And so I came home, started networking, and one of my buddies I had helped get into contracting helped me get into a full-time EP detail in Northern Virginia. I would find out later that that family was the son of the king of Saudi Arabia at the time. So I started working there in early 2011. In 2011, the Iranians decided they were going to try to assassinate the Saudi ambassador to the U.S. in downtown D.C. That got foiled by the FBI. And all of a sudden, it was a big deal. And, the Iranians are kind of in the hot seat, but they had contracted it out to one of the Mexican cartels. And so there was uncertainty to be like, will the cartel try to make good on this and assassinate somebody else? We were like the next family of importance in line, being that son of the king.
Wow.
So that was a really interesting time, being a civilian EP person under nation state threat in the DC area, not being a gov. Then my next thing after that was a buddy from Iraq called me up. He's like, "Hey, are you still alive? Because I know what's going on with you right now." Right. And I was like, "Yeah, thanks." And he said, "Look, got the easiest job ever at the State Department. We're teaching diplomats how to not do dumb things, how to not get themselves killed when they go overseas. And you should come and teach." So I did. 3 months later, Benghazi happened, and Congress, the Accountability and Review Board on Benghazi, ordered a review of all the training at the State Department to figure out what could have prevented this, right? And they found out that there was only 7 dudes attacking diplomats in training and teaching them how to survive, which was us 7 dudes. So we got grabbed by Congress. They said, "Here's the white paper that's coming out for everybody. This is how we fixed Benghazi. And here's all the criteria for training for diplomats going to high threat zones. You need to create one program that basically hits 90%. And then we'll call that the fix. And then you're going to train that." So we did, and they did. And then all of a sudden we had like news crews coming through our training, 60 minutes. We were on the news, like shooting at them and blowing them up and like fix Benghazi, which was interesting.
Right.
And then I had a buddy call me up and say, "Hey, bro, you ever thought about working at Facebook?" And I said, "No." What would I do at Facebook? Did you even know what it is that I do? Let me help you out. I teach one group of people how to get shot at correctly. I teach a second group of people how to shoot back correctly. And I teach a third group of people how to patch up the first 2 groups of people. What's going on at Facebook, man?
Right.
And so essentially they were redoing Mark's executive protection programs. They had brought in a new vendor, and they were taking a more holistic approach. So I was one of 2 managers to set up Mark's new executive protection programs in 2013-14. In 2014, we set up Sheryl Sandberg's program after her husband passed away by an accident.
Right.
2015, I built their security technology research and development labs. And then somewhere in there, I started becoming involved and owning the TSCM program around there. And then my last 6 years, almost 7 years there, I was tasked with building their global anti-corporate espionage program. So if you are nation state or you're a predatory entity like Huawei, Bank of China, whatever, and you're trying to steal our stuff without going in through the firewall, that was my team. And so we basically ran spy ops globally for like 6-7 years. It's a fun time.
That is a wild resume. I mean, I think about
now I'm at Kroll as a consultant because I've done all these crazy things.
The bookend that. So now you're doing more of the consulting of putting that all together. And what have you learned over all of those programs and periods that you can then, give to businesses and corporations to be able to use in similar scenarios without probably the same threat picture? Is that a fair, or is it similar? Or are you getting big corporations that have these types of threats, or are you getting smaller that are trying to figure out how to use some of your knowledge and build it into their security program?
Both. But over the years, I realized that security can't be a function of like doing security things. Otherwise, like you just do security things until the budget runs out or the appetite to fund it runs out, and then you're done.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to understand, how does this work within the government governance and risk management space within a corporation? Why is it important? What's the actual value proposition? Like, what does an executive or board of director need to understand to say, you know what, I believe in this and this is an important thing. And it's not just about security. It's about the bigger picture of the stability of our company. And so now with Kroll, I spend most of my time with the C-suite of our Fortune 100, AM Law 100 clients, ultra high net worth clients, helping, telling me their strategy, right? What they're trying to accomplish, their goals and their roadmap, and helping them understand what security risk looks like in their various ecosystems and how it might impact those goals and roadmaps. And then helping them really wrap their head around at a strategic level how corporate security needs to function to maintain the proper function of their business. So I'm at a much more strategic, risk management focused position.
Well, that's a very interesting scenario. And I want to dive a little bit deeper on that, because I don't care what part of the spectrum you are security wise, that conversation comes up of how do you quantify the security program? How do you look at it from budgets and ROIs? Because we find that people call us or engage security services after something bad happens, or they see something bad happen to somebody else and they're trying to think through what that may look like. Yeah. And we also see, and you nailed it right there, is how do we not get stuck in that rut of security as a cost center? How do we look at it more of a enabler of strategy, or what are we trying to do? And then lastly, and I'm very interested in this point, is security can always be looked at. The wins are very quiet. The losses are very loud, right? So we get that a lot sometimes too. People will go, we really haven't had anything going on. We're kind of talking about cutting this budget. And we're like, well, so you mean it's working? Like how do you educate that to the C-suite? Because that also happens too, of how do you put that ROI on, the event that was thwarted or that didn't, that's not as impactful or relevant or tangible as, okay, we had a loss, we had a hurt. How do you navigate through that? And especially from the C-suite perspective, is that different organization to organization, or is it a common language or a common framework or system that you use to kind of do that? Or because I would imagine some gets buy-in, some doesn't. I hear from executive protection teams. They'll go, oh, this assignment, there's a ton of buy-in from the principal, or this one, they won't tell us their travel schedule. The board forced this executive protection program on it. They don't like it. They don't see value in it. How do you navigate through? I know I threw a lot of that at you, but it kind of comes back to that. How do you communicate that? How do you look at strategy as opposed to cost centers?
Yeah. So here's the thing. First of all, you ended with cost center, which is my favorite thing to hate on. So I'm just going to go ahead and hate on that right now. Get it out of the way.
I'm right there with you.
So here's the thing. You seem like a pretty experienced guy. Any corporation globally, well, Fortune Corporation, what is their biggest cost center?
People?
Nope.
Maybe their brand, appearance.
Brand drives value.
Right.
Their legal department is by far way more well-funded, way more well-paid than security will ever be. And they produce nothing.
Right.
They produce nothing except for they go to court. Sometimes they tell the business, like, these are the options that you have in front of you. But what they have done as an industry is to say, like, look, you're not lawyers. While you may be able to recognize, hey, there's some legal issues, maybe some legal risk here, you're not specialized to understand it, to define it, to quantify it, and to provide options for managing this legal risk. So anytime you come across legal risk, you need to call us so that we can do that for you. We do the exact same job. In fact, every time I take on a new client or do a new project, I say, hey, I need 30 minutes with the general counsel. They don't really want to talk to you. I'm like, don't care. Or we're not doing it.
Right.
This is my one thing that I have to have. A lot of people want to get in front of the CEO. I don't care. CEO doesn't actually have that much clout in most organizations. It's a little bit of a fantasy.
Yeah.
But the general counsel, if I get 30 minutes with the general counsel, it only takes me about 20 to convince them that he and I do the same job, except they manage legal risk on behalf of the organization, and I manage security risk on behalf of the organization. But the way in which we do it in a consultative manner is the same. And once they recognize that, they're like, oh my gosh. I'm like, so here's the thing. You're worried about workplace violence. I don't own it. HR owns workplace violence because they own people risk.
Right.
Come with me to the head of HR and let them know, like, hey, we just found out that if there's any workplace violence, domestic violence, bullying, harassment, insider threat, you actually own that risk. We figured that out. And they're like, oh my gosh, well, that's a security thing. I'm like, well, actually, security, we don't own any risk. Like legal, we're here to help you navigate your risk landscape. So since you're the owner of people risk, and by the way, I can't actually set up a workplace violence program and put policies in motion that affect employees and contingent workers and vendors and stuff unless you say it's okay. So we need to work together, and we need to share information in a contained environment, right? And so having these types of conversations with the people that actually own the risk and getting away from the government mindset of like, I'm a security guy, man, I'm here to keep people safe. Like, you have a very limited ability unilaterally to keep anything safe in an organization.
Right.
But once you actually realize who within the business owns that specific type of risk and you convince them of it, and the only way for them to be a proper steward of those assets and that type of risk is to engage with you, now you're not building a security department that's separate from the business.
Right.
You're building a security practice that has fingers throughout the business that becomes that consultant, just like the legal department. So when your funding starts to come under scrutiny, well, this workplace violence, this insider threat, we haven't had an insider threat. It's so expensive. Great. Well, I'm going to roll in with the GC and the head of HR because they're actually the owners of the variety of risk there. And this is how important it is to them. This is the potential losses. This is the potential reputational issues. All of these things that make up a value proposition of something they own, that security is the primary mechanism of protecting their asset class. If we can wrap our head around that and have those conversations, then when the business comes for our budget, and they will, right?
Right.
We know what's going to happen. We go to our stakeholders and be like, hey, we've got to cut 20%. Which 20% do you want to live without? And they're like, I don't want to live without that 20%, right? Now we're coming back to the table with all of these people being like, why is it that we need to cut so much when there's so much help and value being provided here?
Right.
The different conversation, because I'm not defending myself. I am actually helping and enabling my partners in the business who have the seat at the table.
Is that a cultural shift? Meaning that what you're doing is because I think traditionally within a company, they look at that risk is owned by the security department or the security whatever. Are you more positioning it? And I've never thought of the legal department, area of that, but that makes total sense of, how do you do that? But is that shifting that accountability so that there's an understanding of that HR risk relies in HR and not in the security department? And where I'm going with that is when something does happen, does HR look and point at security and go, no, that was them? Or are you creating a culture where they're looking at it and going, no, this was our, piece of that? As a group of people working together on this problem, right? So yeah, it's a cultural shift for the security department. It's a cultural shift for most companies. But every company right now, one of their primary strategic goals that will never change is to increase collaboration. So we're actively doing that while we're creating greater clarity. And so if there was a security incident that happens, it's not just me going in front of the C-suite to answer questions. It's me and the GC
and HR and maybe even the leader of that business vertical, because look, you have a business to run, you have things that you're doing. Here's what we need to do to protect these primary assets that you're relying upon. We understand there might be friction. We understand it might impact your business. So what are the best ways for us to accomplish this together? Which means you're going to live with vulnerabilities and gaps, right? You're going to leave risk on the table that you're not actively mitigating. But everybody knows about that. And so when everybody comes and says, hey, actually, this was a good plan. We foresaw this happening. We acted appropriately with our planning, with what we could foresee. And actually, this is a pretty good security outcome, even though it kind of is a bad outcome for the business. Or all of us didn't see this coming at all. We're working to find out how we didn't recognize this possibility. And if it happens in the future, what can we do about it? Those are different conversations. They're all around program and process management, not who's in trouble. Because now we're conducting ourselves like the business units we serve.
Right.
And so now we're not in trouble anymore as security. We're part of the business and process development continuum that fuels all successful businesses.
From a structure and budget standpoint, because that we see that different in almost every organization. Some have a security director, some have a security manager, some don't have anything, and you're dealing with somebody in HR or somebody in legal, or it's very different from company to company. And I've never thought about the legal side of it, but are you a proponent of security reporting up through legal? Is that its own standalone department that kind of works like legal does, where it partners with these different places? And then how do you control or advise budget? To say, is that the security department standing up and saying, hey, we need money for this workplace violence program? Or is that working with the HR department to stand up and say, this year we need this dollar amount for, how does that work from a structure standpoint?
I think it changes based on the type of company, their type of business, what's important to them, right? But I actually love the idea. If there's a strong general counsel who also is a big proponent of security, that's ideal. Whoever you report to needs to be a strong proponent for security, or else you're going to be pushed to the corner, right? No matter how good conversations you have.
It is an interesting scenario because legal gets looked at as the advisor, right? They're not. And
absolutely.
Security can sometimes be looked at. Well, if you ask the security guy, he's going to tell you need a guard, a gun, a gate. They're going to go straight to without thinking holistically for the business. The legal side is more that advisory piece of here's what I would recommend, but also understanding the downstream impacts of different departments and it's an interesting scenario.
Finance is also a really great partner to have. You should have a really good relationship with the CFO, because if you're trying to get budget to do things, they can look and be like, oh, so you're saying that HR or legal or this business vertical is the primary consumer and owner of this piece of the pie, right? Yep.
Right.
Okay. Well, they're getting this much budget for this specific thing. Like, can you have conversations to see how you can share budget, right? Because they should be contributing to this because you're actually a service line to them.
Right.
They should be procuring this service from you. And so you can actually decrease the security budget by identifying the dependencies that these other business units have. They have bigger budgets. And so, yeah, you know what? We can give you 5%. We can give you this percentage to enable this. We can procure this software for you, and we can hold those licenses. Like, we can do these types of things, which also helps with the budget, because the business units are always going to get more budget because they're the ones producing product or whatever it is. So having those conversations with the CFO, this is not uncommon in business. If you have two verticals working together towards a similar project, they have a shared budget for that project.
Right. No, very interesting. And it's something we battle with a lot too, is how do we explain the cost of doing nothing? And I think you touched on that earlier of let's call out the risk, let's call out the gaps, and let's have a conversation about it and figure out what gaps we're comfortable with and what we're not. But also let's paint through the picture of, what happens. We run into it. Outdoor assets. Somebody says, somebody comes and steals some trucks from our lot. That's going to cost us a couple $100,000. But then they realize, well, those trucks, if they're used for a service purpose, have been grounded, and we just lost a month's worth of
Right.
revenue while we're so it's that type of thing that we try and educate and go, okay, that's fine, but let's just understand the full scope of the risk. And I'm kind of talking out loud and maybe speaking for you, but as you kind of were talking about, put those risks out there and find out what we're comfortable with and what we're not. That may be the answer to that, because we constantly kind of have that conversation of what is the cost of doing nothing? Don't wait until something bad happens before you address it. Be eyes wide open to it and understand it, or put a measure in place.
Yeah, can I tell you a story that kind of helps really
Please.
understand this in a very foreign way for security people?
Yeah.
So, the last half of last year, 2024, I was going around to my clients. Every time I would talk to a new client, current client, whatever it would be, I'd always get a few minutes with the GC and with the head of HR. They basically encompass most of the risk and the stakeholder relationships that we're going to have. And so I asked them a question. I said, hey, we're coming out of this work from home thing. We're trying to force people back in the offices. We have all of these things going on. We have the political issues that we have. Election was coming up. I'm like, so help me understand. If you look at your people portfolio and you say like, okay, this is the baseline for a happy, productive employee. And then what are the things that stick up, right? That they're above the baseline of normal, their behaviors or activities or sentiment or whatever that you're just having trouble wrapping your head around. And for about 6 months, I was mostly told, Tim, I don't know what a happy employee looks like. I have no baseline of normal for a happy, productive employee. They're all up in arms. They want to work from home. They hate working from home. They want to come back to the office. They'll never come back to the office. If we make them come back to the office, how much extra are we going to pay them? So that they, gas and things, all these things, childcare that used to be part of like, hey, I just have to do my life. Plus, we have elections coming up, political divide. When we had the elections in 2024, globally, if you looked at major presidential and prime ministerial elections, almost every incumbent lost. That never happens. Incumbents always have the advantage. And what that showed us at the end of 2024 is that across the world, across all of these diverse cultures and people sets, was a distrust and a frustration with establishments. And then in December, United Healthcare CEO gets assassinated. And that's bad.
Yep.
But that triggered for me 100 nights of travel between January and June of 2025. I usually do 100 nights in an entire year. I did it in the first half.
Wow.
Why?
Because people were reactionary.
What to?
To seeing a gap that they weren't looking at before, probably.
They saw the social media support for this Luigi guy and for what he did and what he stood for. And then they realized that a lot of them were their employees.
Right.
And they were like, oh, what? Like, how do we deal with this? And so essentially all year I have been working with companies from a security perspective. How do they manage their people strategy? Most companies coming into COVID, you had two types of companies. You had companies that were really thoughtful in their culture, how they recruited, how they worked with their people. They had high performing, teams, like things were going really well intentionally. And then you had companies that were like, yeah, things are going pretty good. We don't really intentionally do this culture thing, but it's working out. Right. And then obviously you have like companies with poor cultures that don't care about it anyway.
Right.
Coming out of COVID, there are no Fortune companies, I'm convinced, that can say we have the same successful culture we had pre-COVID.
Right.
All of these cultures have been fractured. So how do you help a company rebuild their culture in flight when they have to produce, when they have to earn, when they have to keep stockholders happy and motivated to continue investing. And so right now, we have this issue going on where companies don't really understand how to manage their employee populations and by extension, their people risk.
Right.
So then if we go back to a couple months ago in July, 345 Park Avenue in New York happened, right? The guy showed up to the Blackstone building, but targeting the NFL in New York City.
Right.
And, he did that active shooter thing that really, again, raised, oh my gosh, we need to do active shooter. Are we doing what we need to for our executives? And then last month, I was actually in Hudson Yards, New York City, visiting some people. And all of a sudden, the building we were in announced that there was an active shooter the next intersection over. So they locked the building down. They're like, oh, this is super interesting. I'm there visiting people. They know what I do. And so they're like, oh my gosh, what should we be doing right now? And I'm having conversations with some of the security people, and we're just kind of like monitoring. And then all of a sudden, active shooter in the building.
Wow.
And pandemonium.
You're one of those, we called it at the police department, pardon my French, a shit magnet.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. Now that you know me, you...
There's a term for it. And, but anyway, sorry, squirrel moment. But man, you've got a knack for it. I with the stories and the different, anyway, sorry to interrupt. You're right in it. Active shooter in the building.
Yeah, active shooter in the building, and like it looked like a movie. People just flooding the hallway, coming out of everywhere. And I was standing like right near the elevator lobby on my floor, like 50th floor or something, like way up there. Partially because I was on the phone with some people talking about it, and I didn't want to be near employees and like freaking them out. And the other thing was like, if some dude gets off this elevator, I've got a laptop and that thing's heavy. And I'm going to chuck it, and then I'm going to rush him because that's probably my best,
right?
And anyways, people come down this hallway and they stop at me and they're like, what should we do? And I was like, oh, that's super interesting. So that was a false alarm.
Right.
A company a block over did an active shooter drill that produced a live 911 call, and they shut down that business district for an hour, maybe 2 hours. People... There's a news article. New York posted a news article about it, like what happened. There were people that went to the hospital from anxiety and panic attacks after that. Most of the employees for a lot of these companies, or not most, but a lot of the employees for a lot of these companies were like, I'm going home. I personally talked to several people this month, and they said, you know what? I didn't come back to work for 2 weeks because I would get dressed and I would get to my front door and I would like start to feel emotional. I'm like, I can't do it right now. Right. That was a false alarm. And as we came out of that, within an hour, the news broke that Charlie Kirk had been assassinated.
Right.
And so everybody was like, oh my gosh. And so then the following week, I was out in the Phoenix area. I was out at Embry-Riddle University speaking with their students, their global security intelligence students. So they're in Prescott, Arizona. It's about an hour and a half from Phoenix. And that weekend was going to be the big memorial service that actually packed out like two stadiums.
Right.
And, I gave a really great talk to the students, had a lot of good conversations. I spent like 4 hours with these students, 4 or 5 hours with these students. And they had tons of questions like, what does this mean for everything? We talked about what the next 2 decades of security, like your career, this is what you're going to be doing. The following week, I was at another client. I was leading for their big global security summit. I was leading a risk management workshop for both the cyber and the physical security orgs. How do we understand risk and threat before it clears the landscape? So before it's over the horizon, right?
Right.
How do we prepare for these things? These are tough questions. We had a really great workshop. And then the CFO of that company was there for some reason. And he gets up and he's like, look, Charlie Kirk getting assassinated last week. I'm supposed to do a major commencement address at a major university and my family is begging me not to.
Yeah.
This is how deeply these incidents are hitting these companies. I mean,
Sure.
Really, executives reconsidering giving commencement addresses because their family's pressuring them. Companies, HR people, they can't figure out their people risk. And so here's the thing. If we are going to lead for the foreseeable future, the next 5 years, we are going to have to focus on leadership, cultural development, and risk management. And if you're a security leader and you're not prepared to do that, it's a good time to retire.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be ineffective.
Well, and that's another piece I kind of wanted to dig a bit deeper on. That leadership thing is something that comes up. I mean, our generation seems to be the one that's bridging the gap between the command and control style and you talked about, the COVID thing, and now we're coming out of that, and the whole work life is being reimagined as far as how do you give people freedom to work remotely, and how do you manage that from a risk perspective? Like, everything's just different, and how do you go through that? But also, we know that the old style of leadership, and I would even argue the 40-hour work week is gone. What's emerging and what's coming out of that, certainly we kind of know from a leadership perspective, but that leadership style and kind of how you put all that together, and that culture piece, you noted that where some of these now are the employees that are feeling the same way as some of this, and people are Howard Schultz said that company culture is what your employees say about the company around the dinner table. And I think that's a really good way to kind of frame that is how are those conversations happening? But no, it's very interesting. The leadership, the risk management, and the culture piece. From a leadership perspective, what are you seeing, or what are you advising folks from that? I mean, you're starting from the top with these C-suites and these higher levels as you're having these conversations. What's the big message there, or where do you even start?
So, go back to the elections in 2024, and then United Healthcare, and then all of this politically, ideologically generated violence that we're in the middle of. Like, we are now back in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. If we look back to the 1960s, it was campus-driven protest violence that was looking at the government for a while, focused on the government for a while, and then they said, you know what, the government doesn't care. We're not moving the needle. So they switched at the late 70s and into the 80s to targeting and assassinating CEOs and leaders of the global corporate private industry, right? Because they thought if we can make these businesses change how they do business, we can influence economic policy.
Right.
And we are back there, and we're going to be there for the next 20 years. So one, how do you reestablish trust between your employees and your brand and your leadership and your employees? They're two different things. So I was just talking to somebody this weekend who said, yeah, we're cutting back. People got laid off. And then literally the day after a bunch of people were shown out, the CEO announced this big donation to charity. Everybody was like, why would you do that?
Right.
And guess what?
It was to soften the blow, or try to?
No, it's just because they're like, oh, tax write-off, but you're laying off employees.
Yeah.
Right? And so people are not thinking like my job impacts culture. Business leaders, you must be a cultural ambassador, and you need to intentionally build allegiance with your employee base back to your brand, and then a separate allegiance or trust, at least, between the leadership and management and the employees. One of the hardest things that's going to make this difficult is that everybody over COVID has been conditioned to react negatively and loudly to anything that scares them or they don't understand.
Right.
So much that we don't have dialogue about anything anymore because of what somebody might react.
Right. And that's where I was wondering, is the answer bringing everybody to the table and being a part of the conversation, or what? I mean, what's step one in that process?
I mean, transparency, a good vision. Hey, here's what we're going to do. This is what it means to run a successful business. So we're going to be doing all of these things for these reasons. We need you to do these things to help sustain, right? It's a big education and transparency thing. A lot of people are going to have to become very comfortable with explaining their job, why they're administrating in a specific way, and why the company is on a direction and also doing other things. You have to build that trust.
How much of this, and I think a lot of security professionals get this a lot. You see the United Healthcare, you see an event X happen on the news. Then all of a sudden they're getting hit with potential clients saying, what do we need to do? How do we do? How do you balance signal from noise and telling them, you know what? Because I think about that, there's a bias there, and I'm forgetting what it's like, the top of mind bias, like the at Disney. What is it?
Recency bias.
Like there was a alligator that ate a kid at Disney. Remember that? It hadn't happened ever, hasn't happened since. But then everybody was like, I'm not going to Disney because my kid's going to get eaten by an alligator. Right. Is that, so how do you advise? Because we get that all the time. We are still in conversations with clients about the United Healthcare shooting and what to do and how to deal with that. And, how that affects them. What do you do, and what would you tell security professionals? Like, hey, is this signal? Is this noise? What's actionable? What is, hey, just wait till next week. You're going to have another event like that pop up. How do you navigate through that with?
So, it's interesting because it depends on who you're talking to and who's in the relationship, right? So speaking of trust, right? EP vendor or security service provider to the business, there's a certain amount of distrust that you are just trying to mark up the spend, right? So the good thing about me being at Kroll is we don't do operational services long term. We'll facilitate them for you like for a week or a little bit. But if you're like, yeah, I want an EP program, great. You know what? Let's do an assessment and then we'll help you with the RFP. But we're not doing it.
I love hearing that. I always, my biggest thing is, don't do prescription before diagnosis. And I think we get into that so much in the security industry is we say you need X. But I think when people come to you with this, the answer is, I have questions. Tell me more. Let's talk through this and let's go through. And
so a couple things that we've been trying to do to repair that trust divide between service provider and client is we've been working with a lot of service providers that are very reputable, whether they're EP or security officers or whatever it may be, and say like, look, you need a third party who's not invested in making money to give you the information, to do the assessments and everything. And so we've actually partnered with several companies. We basically run their back of the house. Hey, you need an assessment? Kroll's going to do it. You need an executive threat assessment, an IRS 132? Kroll's going to do it, not us. Then we're both going to get like whatever's coming up. You need a threat investigation or an internal investigation? Kroll's going to do it, not us. That way, we're not trying to preserve business. They can call balls and strikes. They can actually look at the root causes without having to worry about how it's going to affect the contract negotiations, right? So that's one thing that we've been doing for service providers to really help them actually establish more of a solid reputation and more trust. Two, when I go to the C-suite and they're like, EP, ninjas, we need to do something. I'm like, all right, first of all, what is your executive security strategy? Mm-hmm. And they're like, great. Here's what we're going to do. We'll do this assessment. Number one, we're going to talk to your executives. We're going to look at all the different things throughout the life cycle of business, not just physical, disaster, everything that could affect your executives, their homes, their families, philanthropies that they're involved in and everything. And we're going to come back and say, look, you should develop a philosophy, an executive risk strategy that encompasses these things. And by the way, that's not procuring security services. That's literally, here's the findings, make some decisions and decide on the strategy, and then have a program manager overseeing these things and saying like, okay, you know what? every other year, we're going to do a residential assessment on primary residences. And then every 5 years, we might do secondary residences for some people. We're going to do an IRS 132. We're going to look at travel. Let's make sure that we're really cleaning up travel and doing travel risk assessments, and things like that. That is, you hire one person to oversee that portfolio, and then you have service providers that can provide those things. That's a massive amount of data.
Right.
That you can now have in context around your executives without having to start an EP team. And maybe you'll get there. Maybe you won't. Right. There's all sorts of ways by working within current business protocols and operations and adding security to make things safer, right? The second thing we talk to them about is their people risk strategy. So, hey, let's do a big assessment. We'll look at your culture. We'll look at your people risk and everything, and we'll do the executive strategy. We'll also do your people risk strategy. What cultural initiative do you need? It's really interesting when we're allowed to go and talk with a bunch of employees and managers. The internal risk assessment is often shocking. It can show companies that, hey, the way you do this type of business is actually angering your employees to the extent that they're like, I hope this place fails.
Right.
I'm not actually helping with this anymore because I want it to fail, because I'm not spending all of my day doing this anymore, because it's a crap process, right?
Right.
You start bringing sentiment quotes like that back to the board and the C-suite, and they're like, that's a problem. How do we fix that problem? Here are the root causes, right? And so we are going through all of these different strategic elements in HR, in legal, in the executive space, in the IP space, whatever they're into, and saying look, this is the root causes of discontent. By the way, you've got some super political management here who don't have any emotional intelligence, who don't realize that half of their employees on their team don't agree and don't care.
Yeah.
So can they be retrained or should they be replaced?
Right.
They probably can't be retrained very easily.
Right. It's a tough
but that is something that is always going to keep the anger and distrust and everything at a simmer, maybe even a boil. You're going to have to make very hard decisions. And not to say, if you disagree with somebody's positions or whatever, it has nothing to do with that. But we do need to separate what we do for the company versus our personal, right?
Right.
I always say, the biggest interesting thing that came out of Silicon Valley was be your authentic self. And then people literally started showing up in their mental pajamas, and you're like, leave that crap at home.
Right.
I don't care about that. And it doesn't help what we're doing here. Right. So how do we help really educate our employees and our contingent workers and our vendors on hey, here's what we do here, and here's how you contribute to it. And you should definitely be authentic.
Right.
But this stuff is still personal.
Oh,
leave it at home.
A ton. I mean, we get into that a lot with, do we need an armed guard? Do we need, what do we do for active shooters? And what do we do? And the only wrong answer we tell people is just to not have the discussion or not put a deliberate, plan behind it. It may be that you don't have the budget or you don't have the need or the risk picture for an armed officer, but you can still start to talk to those employees and find out, at this church or whatever it may be, we have a childcare program. We have kids here. We want to protect them. We're not going to put an armed officer there, but maybe we have a lot of these tabletop exercises where we're educating them on, what to look for, how to do, and talk through these things. Those are low cost, types of environment. It's just always, there isn't a one right answer. There may be some good frameworks to work off of, but I agree with you that the real answer is get in and wrestle with it.
And here's the thing, everything I've talked to you about for probably the last 15 minutes, I'm sorry about that, because once I get going,
I love it.
We're answering business pain. Yep. We haven't even talked about security stuff. We're just answering and contextualizing business pain.
Right.
And that is what's going to bring the groups together to realize that they actually own that stake of security.
Yep.
And so they need to have a part in it, and they need to be proactive and collaborative.
Well, and sometimes we get into that a lot too. We'll get engaged by management or the C-suite at a company, and they'll say, "Man, everybody's real worried about this active shooter thing, and it's the employees are saying they feel unsafe and this, that, and the other." And you talk to the employees, and once you get people in the same room and start talking about it, you find they're much closer, more aligned than you think. And a lot of times it's just facilitating the conversation, or people feeling heard, or kind of having that discussion out. Is often the last place people start, and to your point, it's kind of step one of let's get the stakeholders together and let's really understand where we're at today and go through that diagnosis process.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're coming up on time here. I want to chat a little bit about the kindness games. Although before we get into that piece, I'm curious, as you've gone through your entire career there, so much of that came interesting with the, standing up the service at Facebook and the State Department, everything else. So the security world always has that 3 a.m. call. What went wrong? What's your wildest? What comes to mind when you think of that 3 a.m. I was woken up with X anywhere along there? Does anything stand out as
That's a good question.
Funny or crazy story that you just remember as, man, I can't believe that call? And it doesn't necessarily have to be 3 a.m., but just an interesting call that lit your phone up somewhere along the way.
Yeah. There's a bunch of them that we could talk through. So I used to run a bunch of residential security programs at Facebook, but also I would advise on others around Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Which means I would sometimes get a phone call. And one time I got a phone call from a residential detail person, and they were like, "So the alarm is going off in the house on my phone, but I don't hear it audibly. And it's dark inside. The procedure says I should go in. Should I go in?" And I was like, "So the alarm's not going off audibly. You're getting an alarm on your phone. The call center's called you, but nothing's happening at that." I was like, that's that type of place where you're like, okay, I'm totally justified to send them in. Although that's a tough conversation if we have nothing else to go on. When I was a paramedic, they used to say, treat the patient, not the machine.
Yep.
Because sometimes the machine will give you wonky numbers and the patient looks fine, right?
Yep.
So that was an interesting call because I had to make a call when I was tired, and then I had to literally put a meeting on for as soon as people would wake up. It'd be like, FYI,
right?
This is what happened, and this is what I did. At what point are we going to know if they're awake and alive? Just saying.
Right.
So that's always interesting.
So what was the call? Did you send them in?
No. I said, look, if you can't see any evidence of anything going on, technology fails, man.
Right.
Do you feel like there's anything going on? He's like, I absolutely feel like there's nothing going on. I'm like, okay, then document that. And then we're going to wait. But if you see anything, definitely, right?
Act on it. Yep.
I got another one. A bunch of years ago when ISIS was a big deal, they released basically their Silicon Valley hit list.
Okay.
It's the Bezos, the Zuck, the Cook, all these people. And, they basically put out propaganda we're coming to get you. And basically I got woken up really early in the morning by how fast can you get to the office, because we have board members that have questions.
Right.
And concerns. And so that was kind of fun, actually.
Yeah.
But that was super interesting. But, anytime you're involved in world events, it's really interesting to have family and friends that watch the news to see what you're up to.
Right. Yeah. Or they know or text you or call you about something you're involved in and you didn't tell them about it, but you know how they know. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no, I'm sure there's all sorts of things that come to mind. That always happens. People will ask a cop, "What's your craziest cop story?" And it's like, gosh, that is so tough you go through the whole gamut of things that you come across. And, but no, those are good. So, kindness games. Tell me a little bit about that. I know that's something you started, but we'd love to hear your description of it, or kind of how that started and what you do with that today.
Yeah, sure. 2020, this little thing called COVID happened, kind of screwed everything up. And George Floyd got killed during that time, and that was super tragic. And I felt like everybody was on the exact same page, unacceptable, don't understand how it went that far. we need answers, but this is not the right way to police. And everybody felt that way, but unfortunately we got driven to our corners and we got put in our boxes. And it's like, hey, if you look like this and you think like this, then you have to hate these other people. And I completely disagree with that because I spent my 20s in the Middle East, man. I'm a kid from the cornfield of Illinois.
Right.
Scared of everyone.
Right.
Had no problems with most of those people. Super generous. Love Middle Eastern culture. Still have friends there today.
Right.
And I'm like, we couldn't be more different. And yet there was really no reason to hate each other.
Right.
So me and some friends, we started doing shout outs on LinkedIn we call it the kindness games because we felt like we were in an ideological Hunger Games. And we said, we're going to counter program this by basically talking about things that people were doing that were great. Talking about kindness that people were showing, ways that they were making a difference in this world. And we were even specifically calling out people that we knew were hurting, struggling through this isolating time and elevating them so that they could see themselves on LinkedIn getting praise and, being lifted up. And basically, we started that as kind of a game. And by the end of our first year, somebody on every continent had completed the 30-day challenge, which is crazy.
Right.
So everybody said, write a book. We were like, no, we're not going to write a book. We have a book. And in 2021, our first corporate client called us and said, do you do employee engagement and wellness programs? Because we have employees that are working, but we have not heard from them in almost a year.
Right.
We need a way to bring them together. And so in 2021, we started doing corporate programs. And now we're a leadership and cultural development company. So I have clients, I have executives that I coach. I talk with a lot of security organizations, and we help them understand leadership dynamics in very difficult times and environments, which, that's one of the things. Like, Tim, how can you be kind when you have to arrest somebody or when this happens? And it's like, look, let's talk through it. We've defined kindness operationally. Right. It's basically understanding the human on the other side of the situation, and with what's in your power, engineering the best available outcome for them, which they may not feel like is good, but out of the outcomes that could have happened, you're giving them the best one.
And how you do it is big too. And that, how much is empathy? And that, that's a big buzzword, but one that keeps popping up everywhere. Does that play a role into a lot of this? Is that a separate component? Is that?
So, here's the thing, man. There's going to be people out here that smile when they hear it. So I'm known as like the kindest person in the security industry. Well, maybe Lee is the kindest, but anyways, I'm known for kindness. Right. But to be honest, I'm not an empath. I know how you feel. I just don't care. Yeah. It doesn't affect me. And just let's get this going. Get over it. Right. That's who I am. But the structure, the values that we've created in this leading with kindness philosophy helps even people like me understand how to engage people who are struggling, right? How to bring people together and have good conversations, even when I innately don't care, but I understand it's a better way to lead through life. And so essentially leading with kindness helps you understand how to lead all of your relationships, and connect your spheres of influence. And ultimately, you can holistically lead with kindness. And it's been awesome. We've got some really, really great Fortune clients. I'm an international keynote speaker now, paid to fly all around the world and give keynotes on leadership, on security, risk management, and talking to crowds that really have nothing to do with security, which is really interesting, right? And influencing people on how they live their lives, how they think about living life, and how they can do it even better. So it's been a journey, man. It's pretty awesome.
Well, it's great. I mean, we talked about a lot of things, but I think, kind of the exclamation point is that the world is different, and kind of figuring out the framework. I think you nailed it there with those, what we're coming out of is that, cultural change and how we're looking at risk and some of these other things. So I think it's very interesting what you're doing, and certainly a very interesting career and program. I know we covered a lot of stuff and would love to have you back on and probably dig deeper into a couple of those things. The Kindness Games book, that is available on Amazon. We're going to throw some stuff in there, show notes as far as how to get that. Also your contact information if anybody's interested in reaching out for some of those services. But can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. We covered a lot of things and would certainly have you back. Any final words or any thoughts to leave? Anything on the roadmap in the short term here that you're focused on? Is Kindness Games kind of the focus in the near term, or what do you got? What do you got?
Yeah, I'm like 43, so I'm in what I call pre-retirement. I'm trying to figure out like how to initiate early retirement in my early to mid 50s. So, I'm doing a lot of really fun projects in the security world. I've got great clients. But ultimately, speaking on stage, leading workshops for organizations, I think that's more impactful than all of the security programs I could build. And so, yeah, that's we're building that up. And once that starts to rival my salary, then we'll call it early retirement and we'll stop doing security so much and we'll start doing leadership a lot more.
Oh, that's great. Well said. And I think you're on the right path. You've got a heck of a story and heck of a resume. And I think you're putting all of that to good use. So certainly appreciate what you're doing and appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Ryan. It was good to be here. Appreciate you having me.
You got it. We'll have to do it again. Appreciate you coming on. If anybody has any questions, of course, we will throw some links and some ways to get in touch with Tim if you need to. But appreciate everybody coming on. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments, and we will see you next time.
Catch you next time.